Hello everyone and welcome back. These are Alteryx tutorials and I am Mark Thompson. Today's session is going to be weekly challenge number 222 and it's going to be looking at whale migration data. And what we want to do is we want to take this file that has a million records plus and a few other files, and we want to combine them to find the total number of kilometers each pod. So whales swim in a pod, and each pod swam for migration for each year, and then find the average number of kilometers for the whale in the pod, and then find the pod with the highest average kilometers swum per whale for each species for each year. So let's go ahead and jump on in. When we start out, we've got these three pieces of data. We've got whale migration data. So we've got the whale ID, the day, the year, and the kilometers. And then we have a whale ID associating it to a pod. And then we've got this information about the pods that says pod ID and what species that is. When we're done, we want to end up, and it's looking like this. So the whale species and the year and which pod swam the most kilometers based on average for that year. First thing we want to do is we want to take and we want to associate these whale ID in a pod with what pod and species. Okay, so we do a simple join here on pod ID. And then we, of course, want to take that. We don't need the pod ID twice. And so we then join this here and we say whale ID to whale ID, and we bring in this million records here. And now we'll know when it's joined, the whale species, the pod, the whale ID itself, what day, year, and kilometers. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and sum up this information. From here, we're going to group it by species, by year, and by pod ID. And then we want to know the sum of the kilometers. And we want to know the distinct count of the whale IDs. So we know how many whales were in that pod. And when you come out of that, you see we've got this sum of the kilometers and the distinct whale ID count. Next thing to do is get a simple average. So we've got 11 by 6409. So we say sum of the kilometers divided by the count. And that gets us the average per whale. So you can see 582, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we want to sort that. And we want to say, okay, by species, by year, what is, and by, so it'll organize it by pod and sum, right? But the average per whale. So the average per whale. And here we go, 876. And then we only want the highest group for each species for each year. So how do we do that? We say, okay, let's take a sample tool. It's from the preparation menu. And we want to say, hey, take the first n rows. What is n? N is the first. We only want the first. And we want to group those by species, whale species, and year. And so when we do that, we come out on the other side and we only have the top whale. As you can see, this pod had the highest average for 2001 for the belugas. And that's how we get there. That was a short one today. Hope you enjoyed it. My name is Mark Thompson, and these are Alteryx tutorials. If you liked it, please hit share. Please hit like. Tell all your friends and neighbors about it. And, of course, we always welcome your comments. Have yourselves a great day.